Hi, Year 12. Hope you're all right. Thank you for handing in your nature essays. Those of you who I haven't had work from, can I have that really pretty quickly, please? Was due last week. And I did give you a planning document to help you do that. I'll have a little nag at the end. So, focusing on thoughts and feelings about the natural world and a narrow fellow in the grass. So this was the 2017 exam question. I know that some of you have asked about what the exam questions are likely to be. And this is what the exam board have said about your answer. So that you're going to use poetic and stylistic analysis effectively, use vocabulary and terminology effectively, make appropriate use of relevant literary or other contexts, make interesting and illuminating use of points of connection. So what they said that you could talk about the first person descriptive narrative, the syntax and content convey respect or even fear, which contrasts with the observational detail elsewhere. The reader is directly addressed. It's this idea of a childhood memory in stanza 3. Then you've got disjunction between the use of regular form and subject, descriptions of encounters with the snake, form at odds with unconventional use of capitalization. I like this bit here. The characteristic use of hyphens separate each metaphor, which also suggests the snake's movement in and out of sight. The metaphors and similes used to describe the snake, reactions to the snake and the other members of nature's people, the slant lines, developing into full rhymes in the last stanzas, emphasising the boy's accord with nature and his fear of the snake. And I quite like that as well. The regular rhythm as well. Other things that you could say, there's one unfinished sentence with hyphens, which serves to separate and emphasise the images. The first hyphen creates unresolved tension, the tighter breath, and the chill is not relieved. There's some delayed verbs. And context, you could talk about the presentation of the natural world, and the snake is both respected and feared. That Dickinson traditionally uses that hymn meter to explore the natural world. The snake is both beautiful and threatening. Those links to the Garden of Eden. And you might be able to link it to texts like "My life is still a loaded gun and I like to see it lap the Mars." And looking at your essays, quite a few of you did. Okay, you talked about those kind of riddles and the comparison of man-made things to natural things, and the use of the natural world and natural imagery. So that's from the mark scheme. Here I've just got a couple of extracts from the examiner's report. So this gets published every year, and it's from all the examiners. They compile what they found when marking the papers. They pass it on to the chief examiner, and then that gets compiled into a report for schools. And these are really useful to read because it gives you an idea of what the exam board likes and what the exam board doesn't like. So these are the exam board's top kind of tips for success. They're saying that successful responses are planned and focused, and it's better to write less in a more relevant and structured way than to write lots which lacks direction. And I can see you guys doing this more compared to your last essay. So whereas in your last essay, lots of you just wrote about suspense in general, you just wrote everything. Whereas in your last essay on suspense, you guys wrote about pretty much everything you knew about the poems. Here, when you've been writing about nature, you've been much more focused just on that element, okay, which is much better. Integrating context in the course of the response rather than being bolted on, making it relevant to the terms of the question. So again, when I said to you last time, don't just tell me random things about Dickinson and say, oh, well, you know, she might have fancied her sister-in-law. Make sure that it's relevant. You guys are taking that on board. Explore how language and linguistics shape the meaning by identifying what the writer is saying first and then how it is said, rather than feature spotting and then trying to make it fit the question. Genuinely engage with specific effects created by literary devices, providing personal rather than learned explanations. Avoid simply repeating the terms of the question. Use linguistic methods and concepts where they are directly relevant to the question. So making sure that you're using those techniques. Remember that you're using your technical vocabulary. Avoid lengthy introductions which set out what will be explored, and lengthy conclusions which reaffirm what is said. You know how much I hate. In this essay, I will. Okay? Don't do it. There's no need to. Just kind of get stuck in. Keep the given poem and drama extracts at the centre of the response, and that is about making sure that you are primarily writing about the text in front of you. And the exam board has said that if you're making links to more than 2 texts, your links become kind of short and quite random. They're not particularly effective in that way. So making links to 2 poems in ways that are meaningful, great. Making links to pretty much every poem you can remember, not so great. Okay. Specific things that they said for the Dickinson nature question. So it's not very popular, which actually works in your favour, I think. It's simply that they haven't got kind of marking fatigue. They haven't marked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Dickinson essays. So yours will stand out, which I think is positive. Connecting poems were usually, there's a certain slant of light, I heard a fly buzz and I liked to see it lap the miles, which were relevant to the question. The natural world was often read as representative of relationships and religion. Most responses to Dickinson were able to identify the ways in which the snake is personified, which you guys have done, and how the relationship between humanity and nature may be one of trust or fear, or guarded trust at the very least, which again, lots of you put in your answers. The relative shortness of the poem made it possible to take a top and tail approach in commentary, and what they mean here is going through it kind of chronologically. And for the most part, this paid off well for candidates. There were numerous readings of the last stanza, ranging from the majority interpretation of fear to the idea that the persona had been bitten. Others, taking their cue from biographical information, set it up as a retread of the Garden of Eden story. Sophisticated responses were able to use Dickinson's religious beliefs and views to support analysis in contextual terms. Others dropped in biographical data with less knowledge or made assertions about patriarchal society. And it's this bit about patriarchal society. I kind of want you to try not to talk about it at all for a while. Okay, I feel like we're slightly addicted to it from GCSE. We talk about patriarchal society all the blooming time. And now let's try and do something a bit more sophisticated, a bit more A-level with that, okay? So, last thing I want to show you is an example answer. So you can find these online as well. I'll upload this whole PowerPoint so that you can use the links, use the information here. But we're going to go through this example answer and just explain why it gets the mark it does, okay? Again, every year this is published by the exam board. They give you some examples. And we're going to be looking at section A, question 2 for script B, which is on page 14. So let us make our way to page 14. Oh, it's not that one. Hope you're all having a lovely day. Right. So this is a level 4 response. It's getting 17 marks out of 32, which puts it around a C grade. Okay. Obviously, we're going to hope for higher, but it's a good starting point. And as you can see, not many people do Dickinson, so you are at an advantage here. Emily Dickinson begins the poem by using common metre. The use of common metre makes the beginning of the poem move along slowly and smoothly. However, from the third stanza, she introduces trimeter. This makes the poem move along a lot faster, which in turn creates tension. The shift from common metre to trimeter could be to show a metaphysical representation of the movement of the narrow fellow. Now, we could have improved this. We could have used some integrated quotations. I'm not quite sure that she means, or he means metaphysical. We might mean metaphorical. However, on a much deeper level, the shift from common metre to trimetre could portray Dickinson's attitudes to the Calvinistic way of life or society. I'm not sure how. Let's see if they explain it. Dickinson introduces the use of 7-syllable lines when she states, "Yet when a boy and barefoot." In the Calvinist society, it wasn't acceptable for girls to engage with nature. It was typically seen as a masculine thing. So the introduction of 7 syllables may portray her discomfort of gender stereotypical behaviour. This is evident as trimetre creates a disturbed tone as opposed to common metre, which is seen as upbeat. The pronoun boy is also capitalised, and this could show her frustration to Calvinist stereotypical behaviour. Now, I don't know if I'm entirely convinced by that interpretation. We'll see what the examiner thinks in a minute, but that is one way of bringing in context. You could also think about the adoption of different voices, the making experiences more universal, but rather than simply writing as the self. Dickinson describes the snake in the grass as a fellow. Fellow is an endearing noun which may have, back in Dickinson's time, be what you would call a friend. The use of the noun fellow shows that she thinks of nature and the natural world as familiar and something that she can trust or have faith in due to the fact that a fellow is a friend. Fine, competent comment there on the choice of noun. Later on in the poem, Dickinson calls the animals several of nature's people. This use of personification shows that she values animals and nature. Yep, fine, valid. The noun phrase nature's people also shows that she places animals in a high ranking. People may use the noun animal in a derogatory way. She refuses to call animals animals and calls them people, suggesting that she sees animals as her equals. She humanises them through the personification. Dickinson finds nature peaceful and relaxing as she states, "I feel for them a transport of cordiality." This may suggest that she feels calm in the presence of nature, unlike when she is in the church where she hears strong alleluias roll. Okay, so we've got one little link to another poem. Here, what would I be saying? I feel for them cordiality. This suggests she feels calm. Well, what I'd be saying if you guys had this in is you're just explaining what it means, okay? What about cordiality? Why use that word rather than any other? What are its connotations? It makes it seem upper class, this kind of genteel air about it, which links into the use of that word fellow. In This World Is Not Conclusion, Dickinson creates a completely contrasting image from the peaceful nature in A Narrow Fellow in the Grass. She describes the church as loud and chaotic, strong hallelujahs roll. The loud atmosphere may have made Dickinson lose her appeal in Calvinism. Not entirely an accurate sentence, but Dickinson also insinuates that the Calvinist religion is like an addictive drug. Narcotics cannot still the tooth. This suggests Calvinism has a drug-like effect on the followers and nibble slowly at the soul, suggesting that Calvinism may be addictive. Now, again, it's up to you in interpretation, but certainly I read that poem as that what is the narcotic, what is nibbling at the soul, is that uncertainty, that question, that drive for knowledge. The scene she creates in This World Is Not Conclusion, it really does show insight into how the Calvinist faith may have had a drug-like effect on the followers. This is because when the preacher is giving the sermon, the followers shout in excitement, "Hallelujah," without actually trying to think and understand what the preacher is saying. It is clear that the absence of thought in the Calvinist society was not appealing to Dickinson. This may suggest why she was so fond of nature, as she could think in the presence of nature and not in the presence of the church. Okay. So this is what the examiners have said. Metre and rhythm can be productive areas for commentary if linked well to how meaning is made. And here there is some just competent application that suggests the poem moves faster in the third stanza, linked to the movement of the narrow fellow. Okay? That's, Okay, yep, this is what it does. Makes it go faster, like the snake goes faster. This is just about supportable. The shift in form is also read as Dickinson's discomfort with gender stereotypical behaviour in Calvinist society, which is a bit of a stretch, as is the capitalisation of the pronoun boy, which is kind of what I said, try not to come up with these great big, here's what I want to say, and I'm just going to invent a bit of information about the poem to help you out. Fellow is observed as an endearing noun, what you might call a friend, and this is used as evidence that Dickinson is familiar and trusting of the natural world. Again, this is supportable, but reads very much as some just near competent analysis, unpacking individual words for possible meaning. Personification is observed in several of nature's people, although how this shapes meaning is only just competent. I feel for them a transport of cordiality is read in a straightforward manner, with Dickinson feeling calm in nature, but perhaps not when in church. And this is where it all gets a bit strange. The response is clutching at straws. What they mean there is they're just kind of in a bit of a panic, trying to come up with some kind of answer, some kind of idea or argument. This World Is Not Conclusion is the linking poem, contrasting the loud church, strong hallelujahs with the apparent calm of nature. The drug-like qualities of Calvin outlined with no real purpose other than the semi-biographical idea that Dickinson is fonder of nature as it does not tell you what to think. Some attempts at connection is made as a result. So what we're looking at here is really don't try and get context in for the sake of context. The work just makes level 4, but is mostly some analysis with flashes of competence, such as the attempt to link form to meaning and the observation of personification. Okay? Candidates need to be secure in observing simile and metaphor in poetry, as its use and commentary on it can lift work by at least one level. Similarly, training to look out for lexical fields in play can support better the analysis of how meanings are made. Remember all that work we did, pulling apart texts and looking at all of the nouns and all of the verbs and all of the adjectives, and is there anything that groups them in common? This is why, okay? Just looking at individual words isn't always going to help you out. Look at patterns across a whole text. Biographical information about writers needs to be handled with some care, particularly with some candidates, not necessarily less able, but if you're a little bit stressed in an exam, I totally understand the impulse to put down whatever it is that you can remember, and often biographical information is quite easy to remember. Who can use this learning to make statements and see patterns in things that are not there. Okay, so that is what the exam board is saying. Just going to pause a second. Okay, I'm back. I just wanted to show you the grade boundaries. So let me just zoom in a little bit. This is the 2017 grade boundary. So that essay that we just looked at got a 17. The mark for paper 2, the language of poetry and plays, so that combines your Dickinson with your Othello, it's out of 64. So we're saying that that candidate got 17 out of 64, which doubled gives you 32. So that candidate's answer was about a D grade. Okay, so I know that you guys can do better than that. Having looked at your essays, you guys can do better than that. So what I want you to do is to have a look over your past essays. Have a look at what you're writing. Have a look at the quality of what you're writing. Because I don't think this Dickinson exam is particularly hard. I just think you need some practice in how to answer the question. So, next half term and your other task for this week, we are moving towards your task 2 coursework. I have set you the explanatory PowerPoint and given you a lot of examples. It's absolutely vital that you keep up with this work, guys. This does all count towards your grades at the end of the year and your grade at the end of next year. I've got people in year 13 who are getting a much lower grade than they are capable of simply because they weren't engaging in year 12, and it's almost impossible to catch up when you've missed so much work. I also have to do predicted grades for you at the end of this academic year. You are still being provided with lessons. I am currently working 12-hour days to make sure that you are getting the work. And it's really, really difficult and really frustrating when I am having to chase people over and over again and they are not handing in the work. Okay, this is not everyone. There are some people who've been brilliant, who have been emailing me, who have handed in every piece of work set, but some of you are really letting yourselves down and it's starting to really annoy me. In terms of moving forward, after half term, I will be doing weekly live lessons. I am happy to schedule them for later in the day, but you will need to attend those lessons through Microsoft Teams. I will be calling parents if there is no engagement, and remember that this will directly affect your achievement in your exams and your predicted grades. I cannot predict you an A or a B if you haven't handed in any work for the last 4 weeks. Just can't happen. I know this sounds like a bit of a moan, and yeah, do you know what it is? But you are year 12, nearly year 13 students, and I need you to engage with the work, okay? I know it's hard. I know this is strange. This is strange for everyone. I don't like teaching into a computer screen. I'd far rather be at school. But you need to get proactive and get working, guys. Email me if there's a problem. Check your email inboxes today and tomorrow. Your nature essay is going to be coming back to you via email with annotations and a numerical mark. Take care, guys. Stay safe. Bye.